Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the Capital Improvement Committee meeting of July the 29th. This is our second deliberative session. We'll begin by introducing the members of the committee, starting with Brian.
I'm Brian Rose. I'm the town planner.
Sue Tremblay, school board rep.
Gala Bruck, recording secretary.
Tim Redmond, I'm the chairman.
Earl Carroll, community rep and vice chair.
Nick Camposano, selectman rep.
Hank Boyle, community rep.
Thank you. First order of business tonight is some minutes that have been passed out to some members of the committee tonight. We have the minutes of July the 1st, 2010. If anyone would like to make a motion, I'll entertain a motion. Or if there's corrections.
I do have a couple of corrections.
Yeah, I do too.
Again, what I was working off of was the first draft, which is 21 pages, as opposed to the second draft, which is 19 pages.
Okay.
On page 2 of the second draft, the first paragraph, about 2/3 of the way down, says these figures are through April 31st. Hopefully that is a typo as opposed to Joan coming up with a new calendar. Last time I looked, April only had 30 days.
Okay.
And
Should be the 30th.
and down in the second line to the end of that paragraph, so it says, people will come in and buy, which is misspelled, several lots, and then eliminate the word we, and then so that it'll read, and then there will be none for a while. And let's see, that's a typo, I'm not gonna worry about that. In Janice O'Connell's presentation,
Starting with the financial software.
starting with the financial software,
Catch up with that for a minute. Well, what page are you on that one?
I'm on page 8, so it's probably on page 7.
Yep, bottom of page 7.
The first line, this was brought to CIP last year at a cost of, I think that should be 400,000.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Not
is.
40,000.
Yep.
I believe that is it, other than some typos, which I'm not gonna worry about, because they are not, they're just typos. They're not germane to the meaning of what we're doing or the quality of it. So I think that's it for me as for July 1st.
Okay, Sue, did you have some?
I have the same ones.
Okay.
So I'll move these minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to accept these minutes as amended by Suzanne, seconded
Minutes
by
of July 1st.
July 1st, yeah. Seconded by Earl. Any more discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passed. So the next minutes are of July the 15th, which is our last meeting. I have not read these because I just got them tonight.
I got them a couple of days ago, but
It's a minor typo.
You're all right? Did you have a chance to look them over, Nick? You're okay?
move to accept.
I'll trust them. Motion to accept by Earl,
I'll second it.
seconded by Hank. Any more discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Yes,
You're abstaining?
yes.
Okay, one abstention. So the minutes are passed from 7:15. Okay, the last thing before we bring someone in is a memorandum from the Board of Selectmen that was sent to department heads and committee chair. I won't read it, but basically it talks about how uncertain economic times and the challenge is to maintain the current level of service while attempting to stabilize the local tax rate. The selectmen talk about lost revenues, and they're sensitive to the economic climate. They're asking for assistance from department heads and committee chair to achieve the goal of maintaining services as you develop the 2011 budgets. The only one that pertains to this committee is number 5. It's listed as a CIP, and they are asking that at a maximum we need to freeze the 2011 CIP at the same level as 2010. We recognize that it may be necessary to revisit guidance on this topic to reach our goal. So I want to bring, and it's signed by all 5 members of the select board. Just make sure everybody knows that that was sent around. Taken under advisement. We're not gonna discuss it. It just so everybody knows what's going on. Okay, the first person to talk tonight is Chief Sullivan. We have asked him to come back. There was some questions about whether the chief could maintain levels of service with only 2 cars this season as opposed to the 3 he has requested. I would turn the floor over to Chief Sullivan to give us his recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Maintaining levels of service, we're back up to 29 officers in 2 weeks. We have allotted 30 spots. We were down for about the last 6 to 9 months. So we're bringing our patrol force back up to where it was supposed to be. With that, we have some cruisers are manned by 3 people. We try to maintain 2, so there's some downtime with the cruisers between shifts. My sergeant car runs 24/7. So that's some issues that are going to be very difficult to work with if I lose a cruiser. Looking in the long run, 2 years down the road is a bigger concern to me. We're going to be losing the Crown Vics. They're going to a new model Ford, or if we decide to go to a Charger or Carbon Motors or any other Chevy product, anything of that sort, it's going to require equipment to refit our cruisers. The cages, the trunk organizers, the rifle mounts, the radio mounts, the computer mounts, all of that. We got the best quote we could from our installer, Adamson's Industries, and it's $6,100 per cruiser to refit a cruiser. So if I go this year with 2 cruisers and not my usual 3, I will be in here next year not asking but needing 4 cruisers. That will translate in 2012. We're requiring about a little over $24,000 in just refitting cruisers, because that's coming, and that's my concern. Every other department head in police work that I know of are trying to buy more cruisers this year so that they can push out the retrofitting of these other cruisers further on down the line. And I don't think it's very long term, if you will, to cut back at this point where I can stretch out those Crown Vic cars that we have now further on down. They last about 3 to 4 years as it is.
Jim, can I ask some questions?
Yes, go ahead, Earl.
Chief, I'm going to display some ignorance here.
Okay.
Dealing with the fitting out of the cruisers.
Yes.
I'm gathering from what you're telling us that as a vehicle is replaced or even moved in some instances from a frontline vehicle to a secondary vehicle, some of that equipment is taken out of the vehicle and put into a new one?
Correct. What we do is we move our line cruisers, the marked ones you see with the lights and the markings on the side. When they get older, higher mileage, we move them into administrative or detective cars, ones that aren't doing first emergency responses. Okay. So that equipment is basically just one big tumble dryer. It's rotated around and around. So this year, if, for instance, car 1 is unmarked, and I'm going to move another car into that slot, that equipment out of car 1 will go into this car, and car 1 will go away. The cruiser that got moved into car 1 spot now has the light bar and all the other equipment, the cage, that gets transferred into the new car coming in.
Okay, but if, when you move a frontline vehicle, a first response vehicle into, let's say, a detective car or an administrative car, doesn't that still have blue lights and radio mounts and gun mounts and so on?
It does not have gun mounts. It has a radio, but it has a smaller radio mount, smaller siren, smaller light box. We usually have just 2 toggle switches on the dash versus the array of sirens and all the lighting differentials for takedowns, alley lights, and so that sort that belong on the light bar itself. So there's a downfitting, I guess you would say,
Yeah,
of the equipment that's used to run a detective's car versus a frontline car.
and you're anticipating that a lot of this equipment that's currently used on a standard Crown Vic police cruiser isn't going to fit on the newer models?
Yes, the light bars, without question, they say will not fit. The cages and probably the gun mounts. The problem is Ford right now is holding their cards very close as to what will fit in these cars and what will not. And we've asked and we've asked. They're not saying if the computer mounts or the rifle mounts or the shotgun mounts of those sorts or the cages will fit or will not fit in those cruisers. Is there a likelihood some will fit? Probably. But this is the worst case scenario I'm giving you because I don't know.
You don't know what you're going to be able to cannibalize and what you can't.
Correct.
One of the other issues that we've discussed a little bit is the command post vehicle.
Yes.
And there was some discussion last time about trading off a cruiser this year for the command vehicle next year. Obviously, if we've got to go to 4 cruisers next year, if we're not in significantly better shape, then something's going to have to get shoved down the line. The question is what?
Having to manage the fleet as I have now, with the anticipated, or it's coming, it's not anticipated, it's coming, changeover of cruisers, it makes sense to me to push the command post out a couple more years. It does. Not knowing what I'm planning for as far as what equipment's going to fit into these cruisers, it's hard for me where I have something that is already functional. It's not ideal by any means, but it's functional. Okay? So if I can move that out a year or two and get my fleet reestablished with these new vehicles, that would be my prime importance.
Off the top of your head, and I will certainly accept an I don't know answer for this one.
Okay.
How does Goffstown compare with other communities of our size in terms of number of vehicles and staffing?
I don't know. I have looked. Bedford, similar to us, roughly the same number of cruisers. When I go over there, I drive by there, roughly same amount. What's out on the road, what's in, it's hard to say. Roughly the same amount.
Okay.
Sue, do you have any questions? Okay. Chief, how many marked patrol vehicles does your department operate? Off the top of your head, is it 4, 6?
At a time,
Well, are available for
not
patrol?
available, 6, I believe,
So-
off the top of my head.
So even if you get 3 new cars, you're still utilizing 3 older cars. You're just working them through the system as time goes
Correct.
by.
They continue to be worked through the system. Because we get new cars doesn't mean we get rid of those cars that are replaced. They're
Right.
just moved into another role.
Okay. Because I just want to understand whether you only had 3 marked patrol vehicles, which I
No,
know
we
you
do
do
not
not. I
have
know you
just
have
3.
more than that.
No.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions for the chief? Anything else you would like?
Can I ask
Brian,
a
go ahead.
question? Do any of the older vehicles ever get sold off and the money used toward purchasing a new vehicle?
No, they go back into the town fund, so in a way, yes, but they're not a trade-in. Okay, they're sold at auction. I believe, I just got a memo from Highway that there's 3 about to go out for auction. So eventually, we pass ours onto Highway. And then Highway ends up killing them. Nothing of their own fault, but there's just so many miles and so much time on these things that by the time that they're done with them, they're used up.
I wonder if Megan's sitting back there saying, I want a new car, I want a new car.
We don't have anyone from the finance department here, Brian, but I do not believe that the town selectively reinvests sales of vehicles back into that particular department. I think it all goes into the general fund and then it
Right.
comes back out either through capital improvement or through budgetary requests, through the, town vote. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Chief, or are you ready to go home?
I think that's it. Did they get the update on what cruisers were for what? Because when I looked at the matrix, there were some that were off on the end, and I had corrected them.
For mileage, for the mileage?
The assignment of the vehicles.
I did get the updated
Okay.
matrix from you, and I implemented that into our
Okay.
new matrix.
All right. I think that's
Oh,
it.
we thank you very much for your time, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. If you all turn to your third page of the new matrix that Brian has supplied us with tonight. We go down to line 106. You'll see that last year's total vehicle expense was $166,000.
Tim?
Yes, Brian?
I just want to make sure everybody's aware. Last minute, I did notice, I know I did supply some of you actual copies of the matrix. I also put one on your desk. Last minute, I did notice that some of the line numbers were off. I had deleted a few rows and going back and fixing the comments.
Okay.
So when you're referencing line numbers, I just want to make sure people are looking at the correct one when they
Okay.
when they're looking at the matrix.
We're on the fifth draft committee meeting of 7/29/2010. Anyway, the subtotal on line 106 for all town vehicles. The 2010 adopted budget was $166,000. Our budget is $2 million right now, so we're looking at a 1,000% increase, which is, well, that was the proposed. The revisions bring it down to 1.3 million. I stand correct. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I read it wrong. So we're still far in excess of what the recommendations are for us to try to target from the memo. So,
I think we should look at what our bottom line number is, not by category.
well, I'm just trying to take it
I
in
know.
bits and pieces here.
I know, but I don't think we're ever gonna be able to.
Because even though the CIP committee recommended a lot of the vehicles last year that got moved out by other committees and boards, it pretty much decimated the whole vehicle matrix. And I do not plan on decimating the vehicle matrix at this level.
Right.
We will send along what we feel is
Absolutely.
justified, and then other committees can deal with it beyond that.
I think one item that at least we can note that will affect that bottom line is we don't show in this part of the matrix the $190,000 offsetting revenue for the ambulance.
I see. So that is
It's something.
That's a large
It ain't
amount.
much, but it's something.
this year's, from what I can see, and people can feel free to jump in, the police department is pretty much as they've always been, with no major, actually, it's a dollar less than last year's request. The fire department is a big number because they're requesting an engine.
And actually, when you look at the fire department, their request, even taking it, their request is $500,000 less than their request last year. The fact that the voters didn't go for it is a separate issue. But I think we've got to acknowledge that
Well-
Chief O'Brien has come in with something less this year than what he asked for last year.
So the fire department has a large request, which if this committee sees fit, we will leave it and pass it on. Then the next line is the Public Works Department, and the Public Works Director, who I spoke with personally, has pretty much moved most of his items out also. The two items that made it through our deliberations were the dump truck, which is at this time a 1999, so it's 11 years old, and it's in very poor condition, needs a lot of repairs. And then we left in the Packer. The priority for the Sterling, we did not rate that as a 1. Are we going to leave that as a 2, or should we consider that a 1 as a priority?
Given the condition of the vehicle, I'm
Make it a 1.
I
tempted
think
to
we
make
should
it a
change
1.
that to a 1.
Absolutely.
And then the Packer is a replacement vehicle for the fleet. And the Public Works Director said that he needs it, so I'm inclined to leave it in and let the other committees look at it and see if it works for them.
And again, once again, noting for the record, what you said, Tim, in terms of Carl pushing as much out as he possibly can, once again, his request this year is over $200,000 less than his request last year.
No, I understand he moved 2 voluntary and we moved 1 for him.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a compromise. But the Packer is a priority 2, and I think we can leave it as a 2 because it's, what was the rating on the request? I don't remember. I don't have it in front of me.
We're looking for the,
Well, the priority set forth by the Public Works, the Packer truck.
on his.
I got the thing here in front of me. What was the number on that? 193.
His matrix.
193. It's a 2 on both of them. The department rated it a 2, and we rated it a 2.
Right.
Okay, so we'll leave that alone. So if everyone's in agreement, we're going to send those 2 vehicles along to committee. The Parks and Rec Department is the next one in line. They've asked for a 1-ton truck for $40,000. When do they expect Parks and Rec to have to take over the rail trail? Is it another year or more before that would happen?
I would say less than that. I think they're looking at the next budgeting cycle. Nick, what?
The recommendation from the Rail Trail Committee was to have them prepare a budget next year, take next year to prepare a budget, and then plan on taking the maintenance over following that, but there was no decision yet. The board has not had a decision on that, or a discussion, if you will.
The
So
article in the paper said, what, January 2012?
2012, I thought was what the Board of Selectmen had discussed at the meeting on Monday night.
That was the presentation. We didn't come to a decision on that, but that was the recommendation that came from Selectman Pierce.
Well, then, should we consider the request for the $40,000 to be well, it's already a 3, prioritized as a 3. So maybe that is something that could be moved out 1 year at the very least to reduce that number, the matrix number slightly. Do we have any comment on that?
If I remember Rick's presentation, part of the rationale for that truck was the additional maintenance that they've had to do with regard to Glen Lake. Now, obviously, that's a seasonal thing. So I remember him mentioning that, but I don't know how that impacts the overall utilization of that vehicle.
Well, he stated that he borrows a truck from Public Works when he needs one, but he'd like to have his own so he doesn't have to bother them for it. So maybe another year of bothering could be okay, and then consider it for next season?
Well, what I might suggest then is that we push out, if we push out the dump a year, we also push out the pickup additional year as well.
Look at the bottom line for next year, for 2012.
Yeah. Well,
It's almost 2 million.
that's only because we've pushed some stuff out, Hank, without
Yeah.
going the full distance and moving everything
Keep
out. with
pushing
it.
and pushing until,
Well, it's unfortunate, it's an unfortunate fact.
I mean, I think we're well aware, Hank, I mean, you've been on this committee long enough, I've been on this committee long enough, that sooner or later, it's gonna come back and bite us.
If
It's merely a matter of when.
Earl, if I can disagree with you, if you look at the pickup you talked about in 2012,
Yeah,
that's already 10 years old.
right.
So maybe the pickup should be replaced before the dump truck is purchased and move the dump truck out to 2013.
Okay.
Plus, are we sure that they need a dump truck?
Well, that's what he said he wanted. He needed
Yeah,
one.
he said he wanted, but do they really need a dump truck?
Well-
Or is another,
I think his number,
Pickup type
I think his number
vehicle.
might be a little high, only because he went to the Ford garage and got a price from the Ford garage and didn't go through the
Right.
state bid process and investigate what it would cost. I don't imagine he needs to have, if it's a summer truck for summer use, he probably doesn't even need to buy anything that's got four-wheel drive, so he could get away with driving something that's a little less expensive. But that's not for me to discuss, that's for
Right.
him. So,
but I think,
what do you say we move the new one-ton dump truck out 2 years to 2013? Is that, you think that's prudent?
Probably, then we can revisit it next year if we have to.
Okay. So we're gonna send that one right over there to 2013. And that completes the town vehicle. Now, we only moved $40,000, but the other vehicles, that in our estimation, are deemed necessary for the town to maintain. Any more discussion on the vehicle portion of the matrix? Okay. Page 4, top of the page. What's the consensus on the financial software request from the admin department?
I think we need to leave it in. I think Janice made a compelling case of how necessary it is, and that if what we have now crashes, we have a major problem, town-wise.
Okay.
I agree.
And as far as the land use software, it sort of goes with it, and if they can do one and negotiate a deal for the other, they thought they might be able to get a better deal on the whole package. And I think that would be up to the finance department and the Board of Selectmen and to work out on what's gonna be the best deal. And if it comes in for less, great. The HVAC units are possibly gonna be covered by Mildred Stark Fund, but that remains to be seen, and that has to be worked out with
Refresh my
admin.
memory, Tim.
On
On
what?
the land, financial and the land use software, are those hard numbers or those?
Those were estimates. Those were estimates prepared by finance based on other towns and what they've purchased and what it cost
Could be
them.
more, could be less.
I think they've given us a high end. But I don't know anything about financial software, and I don't know if it's going down in price or going up in price. I know nothing about it. I mean, you can probably put it in my lunchbox for $400,000, but but I can't tell you any more than that. So are we going to leave the admin department alone at this point, or do we move things around?
Leave it alone.
We already moved the flyover out 2 years.
Yeah.
You're not sure about the 50,000, are you, Earl?
Pardon?
You're not sure about the 50,000?
Janice has not asked the trustees yet for that money. We did approve, in our last meeting, money for the clock tower and money for the roof and the gutters.
Yep.
Once that money is expended, we'll have a better handle on what we've got left. At this point, Hank,
I'm leading to, is it right to put the 50,000 as offset by Mildred Stark?
well, I think some of it will probably be offset. Whether it's gonna be a full offset, I don't know, or whether it's gonna be a full offset for 1 year, I don't know, because I don't know how much we're gonna have left.
Yeah,
You know,
I
we've got some bid prices for the clock tower. That's probably a fairly firm price. I know that there was a little bit of hesitation on the roof, because I think there's some things that they aren't quite sure,
I thought it was the other way around.
maybe the other way around.
Roof was all set,
Yeah.
but the railing system
The clock tower,
has
yeah.
to go back out.
They don't know what they're gonna get till they get there.
And my concern is right now, there are several places in here where we have offsets that are anticipated or perhaps, and yet they're being used as revenue inputs. And I'm not too sure about that.
Well,
We'll
I
get
think
to
it stands to reason that if they're anticipating a revenue source and they do not get the revenue source, then the project dies. Because the town's certainly not gonna fund the full amount.
You're raising taxes on the full amount.
I understand what you're saying.
I would leave the offset, talking as a trustee here, I would leave the offset in.
Well, then I understand what you're saying. Why don't we take the 50,000 out, and if Mildred Stark Fund pays for it, then they get it. If it doesn't pay for it, then it doesn't.
You have to appropriate it,
You have to appropriate it
Yeah.
through the process.
gross appropriate it.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Well, you could appropriate the 50,000 and put the other 50,000 as offsetting, and if Mildred Stark doesn't cover it, then the project's not done.
But you said you had to raise taxes for the amount.
No, you have to
On the
appropriate.
net amount.
Oh, I
If
see,
you
on
put
the
in
net amount.
50 and there's offsetting 50, it doesn't raise what
Okay,
you're,
okay.
but
No,
if
I
you put in
understand.
50 but you don't put the offsetting revenue, then you are
I thought you were
raising.
saying that if you had put 50 in and the offsetting revenue wasn't available, then you're still raising taxes for that 50.
No, if you didn't put it on the, but if you count it as offsetting, your net is 0.
Okay. All right. So what do you say, Earl? You wanna,
I'd leave it in.
okay, so we're gonna leave the admin department alone at this point?
Yep.
Library is not asking this year. Police, the Phase 2 of the communications upgrade, we have been advised by PD and Fire that they are applying for a 50% grant on that fund. So it's being sought but not shown. So Nick, in this case, we are appropriating $85,000 in round numbers, raising taxes for $85,000.
Correct, and that's what happened this year. We had 196,000 in CIP.
Yeah.
There was no offsetting revenue shown, but we did receive a grant. So in that CIP line, there is now an additional 90-some-odd thousand dollars.
So does that transfer over to this somehow? There's no way it transfers
No,
around?
different budget year.
And reality check here, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, we're gonna appropriate $193,000. If they get a 50% grant, again, somewhat under 100,000, 96,000,
Roughly half.
then that just operates as offsetting revenue, and it doesn't increase the need to raise taxes by that $92,000.
They're already raised.
Right.
But not expended.
They're not expended. It would be surplus at the end.
Now, in the
Haven't been
case,
raised.
in the case like that, just for information, Nick, what does the board do with surplus funds like that? Do you put it into a rainy day fund?
Goes into the fund balance.
Fund balance, okay. All right. So, the phase two of the communications, we are in agreement, so we're gonna leave it alone, or do something with it? We're gonna leave it alone? Okay. We move down to the Parks Department, starting with line 130. We have revised what happened to the 40,000 from the Barnard Park football field? It's shown as being revised, but it doesn't show where it went. Is it on the wrong line there by mistake? Is it on line 134 by mistake? Just got put in the wrong block, Brian?
Barnard Park.
Yeah, line 132. If it went out 1 year, it's in the wrong block, maybe.
Let me check. I can't remember.
We
what
got
the
Roy
notes
Park Playground in there for 40.
Look at the last matrix, I think we marked them up.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Hank.
I don't believe that had a number on the
We
last.
moved it
time
out to
either.
2014.
That is
We
correct.
did. I wrote it in.
As did I.
So, Brian, can you make that correction on the matrix for us?
On,
The 40,000 for the Barnard Playground?
2014?
We moved it out to 2014,
The football field.
the football field,
Oh,
for 40,000.
what about the, I was looking at the playground expansion.
I guess. The Roy Park
That
Playground?
line-
That we left
That line
in.
doesn't have any numbering
That
on it.
went
That
to
was why I was zeroing in on that.
Okay.
So, I just missed getting it out to.
So are we in agreement that the two pools need to be repaired and we should leave them in as a priority one?
Yes.
Okay. Especially since this truck got moved out now, he's almost in Dave French territory.
Well,
Well-
I think we decided last meeting, these were safety issues,
Yes,
Yeah.
they were.
and they had to be funded.
All right.
Oh, here we go.
Next department is Public Works. We generally don't mess with the road plan. The only thing we could do is, suppose we could reduce it, but I don't see on what grounds we'd have to make any recommendation. So why don't we just leave that alone? We have. There's a bond payment which has to stay in. The West Lawn Cemetery expansion, we have discussed this at great length. Thank you, Earl. And in the long run, the cemetery is actually a revenue generator. So the money will come back for the expense that taxpayers are putting out. Would be kind of nice if that revenue from the cemetery went into a separate trustee fund, that money could be expanded to use in the cemetery itself too.
Sometimes it does.
I'm sure you have maintenance that has to be deducted from that, but I'm sure some of that money could be used for future expansion. Worthley Hill Road drainage upgrade. Carl, may I ask you to come up, or would you like to not come up tonight?
No, that's fine.
He probably would rather not come up.
It seems that the Worthley Hill subdivision project is moving slower than you are in the matrix. Would this be acceptable to move this out so it would tie in with their timetable?
Just to be clear, that project is more of a drainage project, and it really has nothing at all to do with that development up the hill. What we found during the Mother's Day floods and the floods of April of 2007 was that pipe on the lower part of Worthley Hill literally is coming apart, and water was blowing out of the pipe, up through the ground in front of several houses. So now that pipe is collapsed in many places and is starting to undermine the road. When we did the green drainage project at the bottom of the hill, we designed in the capacity to take flow from a larger pipe down Worthley Hill. So that project is really upgrading drainage to handle the amount of water. Now, when Viking Orchards does get built, that's going to alleviate the condition a little bit because there's a couple of detention ponds that are being installed in that development that do not exist today. So, but it's still, that got taken into account when we designed the drainage at the bottom of the hill.
So you answered my question, they are not tied. This project is not tied
Right.
to that project. This project is a standalone project based on a failed
Right.
system.
Right.
Good.
We had a discussion last week. Is that 440 tied into, on a road project, there's another 440,000 for Worthley Hill? Is that
They're
just
the-
coincidence or what?
No, they're the same project. The road plan is used to coordinate our work. I mean, those spreadsheets for the road plan. So we showed it in and created the confusion.
You confused me, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
It looks to me like it's in two places.
And it is, and it should not be coming out of road plan money. What would happen is that 440 would become, it would just roll in as part of the work with the road plan.
Where did that come up again, Hank? I can't remember.
There's a road plan matrix that you have.
Oh, the road plan
Back
matrix,
up.
okay.
Yeah, good.
So was that a misprint in the road plan matrix?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, like I said, we have documents going out 3 or 4 years where we're planning our work, the workflow of the road plan.
Is that 440 still on the bottom line for the road plan?
Yeah,
So the dollars are in both places?
right now it is, but what would happen is something else would move in. You know, as Tim said, the road plan budget is set by the computer model, not by that spreadsheet. So the,
So the 440 wouldn't go to Worthley Hill, it would go somewhere else?
right, that's correct.
Now, does the 440 include all the rest of the elements of that project? In other words, reclaiming the road and all the repaving? So it's not just for pipe and catch basins?
No.
It's an overall reconstruction of that section of road after the
Correct.
drainage is completed.
That's correct. That's correct.
All right, we thank you for that. You can hang out for a few more minutes. Anything left on here that we want to ask you about?
Question on line 147.
Okay, transfer station generator.
We got 29.6 in 2013. The note says anticipating $118,000 grant.
Nice work.
Yeah.
Well, that is a little differential. Is there anything you can tell us about that, or do you not know?
No, when the town updated our hazardous mitigation plan with the state emergency management folks, we included backup power to several elements of the transfer station. It's our opinion, and FEMA accepted the updated plan, so apparently they concur that it would become a public health issue if we could not dispose of our trash during a long-term emergency. So, plus the fueling station is at the transfer station
Right.
as well for all the town fleet. So that's what we're doing, is providing emergency power to those two facilities.
Is there
those two
anything there
functions.
currently?
No. Well, I say no. If you turn off the TV, I'll tell you about the backup little tiny generator that
That runs the fuel pump?
yeah, if
Yep.
we have to, we can pump fuel.
But that's not
It's not really a
meant for that
good way to
project.
do
It's
it,
just a-
right?
okay.
Is this the match portion, the 29,
I honestly can't remember, and I don't have it, but
2013?
Well, we don't have to answer that until 2013.
Right, but I'm just
We can get the
concerned that we're
information
saying, you know,
later.
$118,000 grant for a $30,000 item.
no,
Good
well,
deal.
my guess is it's the match. I do have some updated numbers.
Okay.
for
Yeah,
that
usually
as
it's
well.
like an 80-20
Yeah.
match or something.
Exactly, that's what I was,
All right, we move on to the next page. Back when we were discussing we did move the aggregate screening plant out several years, to 2014, just so you know where that went. I had circled the $50,000 on the line just above it for the Pleasant Street, Mast Road improvements for Elm High Main Street intersections, and that's an application grant item. It's $50,000. That must be for the engineering portion of it, I would assume.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, does that, because you've got them lumped together, Pleasant Street, Mast Road, Elm and High, is it more likely that this design phase would go strictly to the Pleasant Street at this time, or are you going to try and incorporate both designs simultaneously, even though you may not implement both projects simultaneously?
Well, if we get the grant, we will implement both projects simultaneously, and the design would be done on both projects simultaneously.
So that number is for the design?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought we were just told that the Elm Street and High Street is not part of it anymore.
I've heard that, but not from the state.
Well, it just made number 2 on the hit list. The other one is that project from Manchester. So it's going up to the state.
Right.
It's 4 projects, but didn't you just say that High Street didn't meet the criteria for their
That was my understanding.
7-page checkout list?
That was my understanding from a meeting that I had attended. Now, I mean, we can double check and verify to make
Yeah,
sure
I think we should, because I signed as the applicant. I would think, just like when they had questions, they asked me questions. I don't see how the TAC could pull apart our project without letting us know that. Because the two were in the grant application together. We didn't submit 2 projects and they put them together. We submitted a package that had both projects together. Certainly, that Elm Street, High Street for a CMAQ grant is the weaker link.
Yeah, it certainly is.
So, I mean, I can almost understand why they would want to do that, but I would think they would have talked to us before they went ahead and did it.
So, like, further question?
Go ahead.
We're anticipating this grant from CMAQ, but if you don't get it, are you gonna go with the 50,000 to do planning? Or
That'll
are we
be,
kind of planning on something you don't have the grant money for?
those intersections still appear in the village master plan in the priority list for intersections that the selectmen would like us to repair. So whether we go ahead and fund the 50,000 next year would be a decision for the selectmen and budget committee, I would think, to make. From a planning perspective, I would certainly recommend that we do it so that we're ready to go if funding becomes available.
Okay, Hank?
That's it.
All right, Carl, we have 2 more items you requested. It's your sidewalk and drainage projects. And at the last meeting, I think I was the one who spoke up. These are starting to look more like maintenance items that we think should possibly be considered budgetary as opposed to as a capital improvement, because they are not a specific project. They're just sort of an ongoing. And we are considering, and we're going to discuss it further, about possibly eliminating these 2 lines. And I'd like your input on that.
Just tell me where you want them.
Well,
It really doesn't matter to me. I've had this discussion with the CIP committee at least 4 times in the last 13 years. At the end of the discussion, it stays in CIP. I really don't care where it goes, as long as it's somewhere.
but it becomes part of your operating budget then.
There would certainly need to be an explanation to the rest of the budget process that this is what happened. Money shifted from here to here, but it would be a painful first year to do it. But then once it was over there, it's just like resurfacing and crack sealing.
We actually did it with the school on their computers, because their computers had only a 3-year lifespan, so they didn't meet the 5-year requirement for CIP.
And we did the same thing, Carl, you're right, with crack sealing, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. We took that out of CIP, and guardrails, I think we took out too.
Now, just to differentiate, though, the sidewalk one, I can certainly see. The drainage one, however, there is already a drainage line in the operating budget. So we have 2 drainage lines. In the operating budget, there's a drainage repairs line, and in CIP, there's, I don't even remember what it's called, drainage projects line. So we have a litany of drainage projects.
Yeah,
that,
we go back to that's how the one for Worthley Hill is described, as a drainage project.
Yeah, but certainly Worthley Hill, at the dollar amount it is.
We will discuss that, and
just to give you a heads up too, this is not the case currently, but it's something I anticipate in the future. DES has, over the past year, expanded their Wetlands Mitigation Fund. There are more things pay in, and the formula for how much you pay in is much larger. And part of the negotiations and the rules when they pass those fees, or those increased fees, was that the money would be kept in a watershed area. They have the state kind of broken up into major watersheds. So any money that's put in, say, the Piscataquag Basin, that's paid into the mitigation fund, their plan is to make it available through grants to mitigate problems with wetland streams, et cetera. And specifically, what were the rules that just passed were the new stream crossing rules. What their intention is forward-thinking communities that inventory their problem crossings. If we submit those inventories to DES and they know we have projects on the book that meet the criteria to upgrade, we would have first priority on this grant money. So it's our intention to have a very nice detailed inventory of all the projects that we know of in town that have to be upgraded, so that as soon as there's enough funds accumulated in our watershed, we can apply for the grant cycle. They just announced a grant cycle over in Rockingham County over on the seacoast, so they've started to let the money out in that part of the state. I don't expect it'll be too long, and we'll start to see it available in our part of the state. So that's just one more reason to, if we have a CIP line with drainage, match money there, and projects identified in an inventory, I think we can be proactive and leverage grant money.
Could you leverage the same grant money out of your operating budget?
Yeah, we could. It's but what we're talking about in that instance is specific new drainage or upgraded drainage projects. So it's there'll be an inventory with specific projects identified with cost values, which smells a lot like CIP to me.
Well, I think that if you came in with a particular $50,000 crossing that needed to be done, and you could earmark it and say, this is Bog Road,
yeah,
this needs to be done, then I think you would qualify for the CIP process. But since it's memoed as ongoing annual upgrades, it sort of sounds a little bit like a maintenance line item for you. If you have up in the future, if you have particular projects that meet the criteria, then we welcome them and we'll put them in the matrix for you. But we discussed the annual ongoing upgrades as the memo, and there's no definitive source for this funding as opposed to Worthley Hill or Bog Road or any particular project that you wanted to fund.
So you're more looking for the list of projects that would be done each year, like the road plan.
Or an individual project that could have its own line.
See, how we differentiate is if we come across, like when we're redoing a road, if there's an area where the road is particularly bad, which a lot of our roads have, the whole road's bad, but there are certain areas that are particularly bad. And it's because there's just no drainage in that section of road, so we have to install a new drainage system. We're not talking miles of pipe, we're talking a couple of catch basins and an outfall. That's what that line is for, new systems. If we have a collapsed pipe, we come across a pipe, a crossing that's there, but it's collapsed, that would be a drainage repair. So we'd be using the operating budget. So that's how we differentiate.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Carl.
All right.
All right, we'll move down to the solid waste program. We've already moved the barrels out another few years to next year to start the program if it sees fit. And that leaves us with the end of the town total side of the equation.
Once again, we're, when you look at the revisions compared to what there was, we're still twice last year's budget.
Right. Those numbers are accurate, Brian? You went through them and you deemed them all to be accurate?
As far as I understand, all the formulas and everything are set up so that as soon as I change a number, it automatically updates the subtotals. The current subtotal would be just minus the 40,000 that you up above from Parks and Rec dump truck. So that'd be at 1,302,199.
Half of that is the vehicle budget, because the vehicle budget still stands at,
I'm sorry, no, that's
That's
just the
vehicles.
vehicle budget.
I'm working,
The subtotal for everything would be vehicles and projects at 5,372,477.
I'm just gonna do a little math here, so we'll take a break for a second.
And I guess while I'm at it, I'll state the town projects line subtotal. 4,070,278.
Yeah, because we have not touched the road plan, that still remains intact.
Right.
And that's 2.5 million standalone.
What was that number, Brian? 4 million?
4,070,000, so 4,070,278.
Thank you.
All right. We reviewed the offsetting revenues, Earl, last time.
Yeah.
And everything was okay, we were all good with them?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot there when you think about it. We've got the 50,000 in for the HVAC units. We've got $142,000 out of the fire department capital reserve fund, 190,000 out of the ambulance reserve fund, and that's it.
So should the select board and the budget committee send the fire truck through to the voters, there's $142,000 offsetting revenue for that
Correct.
purchase of that vehicle.
That's right.
Okay. And that will deplete the capital reserve fund for the fire department?
That's it, all gone. Unless, of course, there's a proposal to bring in another one.
Well, it makes it a lot more palatable. Rather than 550, it brings it down considerably.
Absolutely.
Even 400,000 is still a lot of money, but it is 1/3 of the cost of the vehicle.
And there's always the hope that the chief can pull off another public safety grant somewhere along the line.
Right.
Although my guess is that money's becoming tougher and tougher to get a hold of.
All right, well,
Nick, you have any insight on that?
Yeah, it's not that it's always been very, very competitive, but once a town receives a new vehicle, because it goes by the average age of your fleet, not only, well, I guess I'll just leave it at that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. When you get a grant and you get a new vehicle, it hurts you for the next
Yeah, you get
rounds
moved to the back of the line.
because your average age has now just increased.
And other people haven't got their grants yet, that's fine.
It's never impossible, but it makes it more difficult each time once you receive a grant.
Okay. Just quickly going through sewer and water, everything is funded by themselves. They're not asking for anything that they don't pay for. And to review the school projects, they have simply asked for their performance upgrades, which are saving money,
And bond payments.
and bond payments, which are obligations. So anything the school is asking for that is not a bond payment is a $62,000 performance upgrade for Bartlett and a performance upgrade
At
for Maple Avenue for $72,000. And
They have saved us, they have saved money on the.
they've shown us that they're saving on their fuel, so I'm sure that they're justified expenses. And once again, we've gone through the whole matrix. I'd like to go back to the Public Works section where we were just discussing the drainage and sidewalk line items. I've said my piece. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to say on this subject? I've been doing all the talking.
I agree, Tim, that these items ought to be budgetary items rather than CIP. That being said, we take out $115,000, we're barely making a dent in where we have to go.
But it's not the dent, but it's the effort to identify these items as meeting the criteria of CIP
Absolutely.
and whether they actually belong in there or not in the first place. So that's my discussion. Not have we impacted the bottom line drastically, but do they belong in the matrix in the first place? So that's kind of my
I agree
point
with you.
I'm trying to make.
I agree with you that they don't belong in they don't belong in CIP. I think they're budgetary.
Anybody else like to comment on them?
I agree, because you've got them here for relatively small figures each year. And then over here, you have 440 for Worthley Hill, and for the next couple of years later, you got a 1.2 million. So you have big drainage items in here, and what do you want to call it, routine maintenance in here?
But do we agree that what I told Carl, that if he came back with a specific drainage project that had a number tied to it, that we would agree to put it into CIP?
That's what he got.
We've done that with Worthley Hill, we've done it with Mass
So I
Road.
just want to have a
Absolutely.
concurrence of the
Yeah.
of the committee.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But we've done it,
Well, I just want to be sure that,
Mass Road drainage, 1.2 million, 1.5 mil.
I want to be sure. So I'll entertain a motion on this subject if someone would like to make a motion.
I will move that we eliminate funding on lines 161 for sidewalks and 163 for drainage projects, as they ought to be included in the DPW budget, not CIP.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Earl to eliminate the funding for lines 161
Eliminate CIP.
and line 163.
CIP funding.
Correct. CIP funding. Actually eliminate the line in its entirety.
Yeah.
Are you saying that? Okay.
You're not putting it off to out years, you're just
No, we're just
eliminating
We're
it.
just saying that it does not belong in CIP. And would you care, and you've stated your reasons, we've all stated our reasons why, and we like that reflected in the record, which you've done. So is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing no discussion, all those who are in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Chair votes yes, so it's a unanimous vote to remove those two lines. Okay, we've been through this twice now. I'm not trying to rush anybody. Does anybody feel there's any other substantive changes to this matrix that will not have an adverse effect on the public safety or the welfare of the citizens of this town?
We're talking 2011 only.
Talking about this year. If you'd like to talk about moving some other things out in the future, we can do that. I don't necessarily want to say that we have to be done tonight. We have one more meeting scheduled.
We're still in the hour to go.
I understand that. I think we've been blessed with a fairly easy matrix this one year. It's been a lot more difficult in the past.
I will move that we adopt the CIP matrix for 2011 as we have revised it this evening.
Second.
The 2011 portion of the matrix.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir, Brian?
Would you like me to clarify what the amended numbers would be?
Please do.
Okay, we're gonna go to page, where are we going to? To the amended town side first, Brian?
I was just gonna give you the subtotals from all town vehicles, subtotals from all town projects.
Okay, let us get on the right page then.
Together.
Subtotals for town vehicles is line 106 on page 3 for everyone's information. And what is the,
106, you want 171?
You can do either one. That's the same number. Should be.
it says, I'm sorry, it says total town vehicles.
By 172.
So
Yeah.
which,
Down at 171, 172 area, all three of those numbers are stated.
okay, I apologize, they're,
It's just duplicated in that location.
that's fine, I didn't see them.
Okay, so the subtotal for all town vehicles is 1,302,199.
Okay.
Subtotal for all town projects is 3,955,278. And then totaling those together, vehicles and projects, it comes to 5,257,477.
And last year's adopted budget was only
Half of that.
2.2. It's 3 million less.
Brian, could you repeat that number one more time?
The last one?
Yeah.
5,257,477.
Thank you.
Now, Brian, does that number reflect all of the offsetting revenues?
No.
No, it does not.
Is
You
that,
want me to give you the numbers down below? The only problem is the numbers down below include all the schools and everything like that. The school numbers.
What about,
Isn't there another?
there's another line.
well, the total
There's
town
another line.
offsetting revenues is still 382,000. Has that changed?
You have a net town total line
Yeah, I
down
understand, I
below
see
the
that.
revenues.
Right.
So if we
Net town-
deducted 382 from Brian's last number of 52, or 52,
Well, you know what,
57477,
Line 300 is where we're talking about now.
Yeah, actually, I haven't calculated that. I haven't put my formula into that. Hang on 1 second.
Line 300, Nick, is that what you got?
300,
Yeah, I'm looking at the electronic version, which
Yeah,
is
okay.
not the same number.
We're looking at line
Numbers.
300,
Line 300.
net town total. Now that includes the offsetting revenues?
Right, should be roughly 3,570,000 something.
Sorry, I had to
Take your time, Brian.
fix my.
So, we had a motion to accept the proposed CIP for 2011. While Brian's working on his numbers, do we want to look at some of these out years and try to make some adjustments here at this time?
Okay, I come up, just for sake of a discussion, 3,573,278.
That's the total?
After the offsetting revenues?
After the offsetting revenues.
How'd you get so low?
Oh, wait a second,
Yeah.
wrong number, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's too good to be true.
257,
That would have been great.
Yeah, I know.
477, looking at the wrong line.
Still around.
4,975, 477.
Yeah, so that's
Still twice what last year
Triple.
was.
it's triple. Last year was 1.6. If it was 1.5, it would have been 45.
Now, last year was 2,025,000,
Oh, net town total?
yeah.
Okay.
25.
My mistake.
Yeah, so still double.
Well, if we eliminate the road plan altogether, we'll meet it.
This is true.
I'm not voting for that. I'm not even making a motion.
I mean, other than the road plan, I don't see where we can make any more cuts
Well, in the
without
past,
without really impacting on health and safety issues.
we can defer to the selectmen's rep on this. Has the road plan has been reduced in the past budget years, has it not? Okay.
This number is not a reduced number.
No, the actual number that comes forward after
Yeah.
deliberations becomes a lower number.
Plus, road plan money has been diverted to bond payments and stuff like that, so it has,
Just the Ara drainage project. Correct. That bond payment comes from the road plan.
and the sewer in Bernardville?
No, that's sewer commission. That has nothing to do with the road.
Oh.
Now, do we,
Say something.
Bill, I'm sorry, I didn't know you had your hand up. I thought you were just sitting
Well,
over there quietly.
Would it make any sense to put the Worthley Hill drainage upgrade back into the road plan?
Well, we may have opened up an opportunity here for a road reconstruction plan to be called a drainage project. Because normally a drainage project, you replace the pipe and catch basins. But if you're gonna grind the road, redo the whole thing from door to door, then it's a road project. So we have to,
Yeah, but it's a road project being driven by the fact that the pipe is deteriorating and it's
I
undermining.
think all the roads that they're repairing, the
road.
pipes are deteriorating, if you want the honest to truth.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to be the one to spit it out here, but, so are we being generous in allowing the $440,000 Worthley Hill project to stay?
First, Carl said that 440 in the road plan was just for planning purposes, and it's gonna go somewhere else.
Well, why does it,
I know, I don't follow the logic either, but
we've already adopted it, so it's a little late hacking that up at this
Well,
point.
the other thing too is,
Most of the
again,
time, maybe, but
we
that's-
have to go back and look at what our function is. We're
Absolutely,
not a budget committee.
I agree.
We're a committee that is charged with determining what in our best interests, and our best judgment, is in the best interests of the town, for what the town needs.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Earl, but are we putting our green light on a $2.499 million road plan and another $440,000 that's going to the
from what
identical?
From what Carl said, and I'm assuming Nick's gonna follow up on this, I would expect to see a different road plan than the one we have here with that 440 and Worthley Hill removed, and somebody else getting $440 worth of repairs.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you're gonna follow up on it and say, okay, where'd that 440,000 go?
We could do that. We could have reduced the road plan by $440,000 tonight.
But he just said it was just an error.
Well, we just have to maybe be a little more vigilant in upcoming seasons when we see these large drainage projects. You know, it's kind of like if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it might be a duck.
But you know, the whole idea behind the road plan was to eventually get our roads into, I won't say great, but decent condition. And if we keep taking big chunks like 440,000 out of the 2 million, you're never gonna get your roads.
We're not going to get them done anyway.
I realize, but there's a hope at least.
But Carl did justify it by saying the road plan is being administered by a pavement index program. And the pavement on Worthley Hill happened to be pretty good pavement. So by the pavement index, it wouldn't be ready to be replaced. It's unfortunate that the pipes that are under there are all no good anymore. So that may be the product of salt or whatever goes on the road may have deteriorated the pipes. So I think we ought to leave it alone for this year and look at it in the future.
I'm sure that Nick's gonna follow up on the road plan, right?
Yeah, the board's gonna have discussions
Worthley Hill
on all
comes
of
out,
these
something
things,
else
so.
goes in, car court.
My road's off the list completely. My
potholes in there, I
my
can
road
drive
is
through.
out in La La Land. It's not even on the plan anymore, so I'm just keeping my...
You talking about Stinson or your
No.
half-mile driveway?
No, Stinson. My driveway's in better shape than Stinson. All right,
Did we vote?
we did, we voted on it.
We do it.
Did we?
We voted to accept the,
Slept on that one.
did we?
No.
No, I don't think
No.
so.
Motion and a second. but
They
that-
made the motion, I seconded, but we haven't
We
voted
haven't
on
adopted
it.
it yet.
Did you want,
You know why we had,
do you want me to go, I
He
sort
was-
of
You
interrupted.
you
the
interrupted,
process
that's
by
where we are.
giving the
Thank you,
numbers.
Suzanne.
And now I've got the numbers from down below. if
What are you
like.
gonna give us? What line? 300?
Yeah, right in that area.
Okay.
I think it's
The proposed 2011 CIP number will be with,
net town total, 4,875,477.
Hmm.
Is that what you have?
Right on.
what'd you get, Earl?
1,000,000?
Or 875,
875,477.
See, now that just proves that a pen is faster than a computer
Wow.
and a brain. All right, so we know what the number is. We know what we're sending along.
What'd you have, Earl?
4,875, 477.
That's what I have.
Okay,
Very good.
so do we want to discuss moving any of these other projects in the outgoing year, outstanding year, whatever the words are, outlying years? Do you want to move them tonight, or do you want to deal with them when we deal with them at a later date? I mean, we really aren't going to do anything
Well, you move them, you got,
substantive.
you move them, you run into one snag, because you don't know how much of this 4.8 is gonna survive to get to the voters.
Oh, yeah.
So you may have, we've got a 2012 list here, which may be a lot different than,
Well, last year's 3 vehicles that were proposed to be bonded is a prime example of that. They didn't get sent along, so we have to deal with them this year. You know, we can't, as much as we'd like to have everything, we just can't have everything.
where would you put it?
Well, I think since we have a little bit of time tonight,
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if we ought not take a look at 2012. Because when you look at the 2012 numbers compared to the out years,
Staggering.
it's humongous.
Well, that's because we moved stuff in there without offsetting something from that year out as well.
I think your central fire station takes up half of that, doesn't
Yeah.
it? 7
Yeah.
million?
It does.
Well, the central fire station is maybe the biggest wish on the entire list.
Right, but it artificially inflates that number,
Right.
double the size that it.
So do we have to go through a lot of moving to justify the one big project that's in there that may or may not ever happen?
I'm just wondering something now. When we look at the offsetting revenue, there is no, see, for the fire station, hang on here.
Should be a
Okay,
bond.
line 128, here we go. Here's where the problem comes in. Line 128 for 2012, we're showing $7 million. We're not showing bond payments in the out years on that $7 million, nor are we showing $7 million in offsetting revenue
Mhm.
for a bond. So that throws everything out of whack.
So how would you suggest that becomes corrected?
We would need to add
7 million next
a
year.
line under town offsetting revenue somewhere in
I think that
the,
it already exists.
uh,
Electronic version it did, 'cause for the bond.
What line are you looking at?
oh, here we go.
Here it is, new
Yep.
station, line 183.
Line 183.
Okay.
We need to show $7 million for 2012 on line 183. And then,
7 million on 2012?
Yeah, because we're showing 7 million expended on line
2012.
129, on line 128.
With no offsetting revenue
No
in the form
offsetting.
of a bond.
Yeah.
Okay, so we add the 7 million in 2012 among 183.
Right. And then on line 128 in the out years, we have to factor in whatever those bond payments
Have it.
would be.
560,
Rather than putting 7 million in that spot, or just,
No, the 7 million stays,
And then the bond payment in 2013, 14, and the out years has to be calculated to show what the bond would be to balance the books at the end of the 20-year bond cycle.
Is it even realistic to keep that in 2012?
pardon me?
Is it even realistic to keep that whole scenario
Do you
in
just- do
2012?
you just take 7 million divided by 20, or how many years
No,
of
it's
a
roughly,
bond?
right, this year I heard, it was roughly about 80,000 per million in
There's-
principal and
You have to get a
payment.
bond schedule, because there's insurances and
Between
The,
5 and 600,000.
Municipal
roughly.
Bond Bank can provide you with that factor based on whatever the current bond rate is.
Right.
And then we just use that essentially as a placeholder.
But I agree with Suzanne, is 2012 a good year to even leave that in there at this point? I mean, they haven't even designed a building at this point.
Well, I guess you guys who are, Nick and you, Tim, would know certainly better than I, do they even have a commitment as to where to put it?
That has not been decided, as far as I know.
So, I'm
And that
thinking,
gets back to the discussion we had with the Barnard property and that whole
Mm-hmm.
Grassmere area. Next year is, we're looking to develop that plan.
and,
We'll
yeah.
go where.
And the
what
thing
it's
is, I mean,
used
you can't design a building until you know where it's gonna go.
Absolutely.
And, it's kind of like, we go back historically, we were talking about the renovations to the old district court. And we kept pushing that off year to year to year because we said, until they know where the court is gonna go, which took them a little while to figure that out, and until they build it, they're not leaving here. And we can't even think about renovations until the space is vacant, or we know when it's gonna be vacant.
Basically, it's a placeholder at this point.
Exactly. But I understand where Suzanne's coming from.
It just,
There's no way that you can bond that in 2012.
well, why don't you make a
The
suggestion?
land isn't, you don't know where it's going, you haven't got an engineering or even an architectural, or you don't even have a concept.
Well, Suzanne, before
Yeah.
Brian gets the matrix all corrected with what we've talked about, would you like to make a suggestion as to the,
I'd move it out at least a couple more years. When you look at the timeline where you only get March to get money for things, unfortunately,
so what year would you suggest, Suzanne, that it gets
I'd
moved?
move it out to 14.
Discussion on that statement?
That's 14 looks like.
Well, don't even look at it, Hank, because it's simply a placeholder.
okay.
It's a realistic placeholder, and it's, what Suzanne is talking about is the realistic question of when it could be designed, placed, and built. What would a parameter be that,
When would we go to sell these bonds?
I'm more inclined to go year to year than pushing it out 2 years.
will go to 13?
I'd go to 13 with it.
This is Goffstown. It'd be a miracle. I don't care, but it would be.
I understand, but then, when we get together next July,
Yeah.
Unless somehow the chief comes up with a fabulous grant for a fire station, then it might be more palatable to the voters.
Then we'll give him a pair of wings and a halo if he
Well,
does
he should
that.
got one already for
You
one.
just hit the catch in selling it to the voters.
Yeah.
Not so much
So
the bond, but the
2013
idea
is
of
fine with me.
relocating fire apparatus.
Just, it's not gonna happen in 12, that's for sure.
Be tough soliciting up to
We'll move it to 14 next year.
Susanna suggested 14, Earl has suggested 13. Does anybody want to continue to discuss this? You need to have 1 year to pick from the two.
I'm with 2014.
Hank, where are you?
13.
Nick? Don't do that.
It's easier to move it out.
Because I'm going to say next.
I mean, 2012, well, if we need to move it out, we're gonna move it out. It's gonna be just, let's move it out. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's a zero net right now on that. The year it appears there's a 7 million appropriation and a 7 million revenue, so it's.
True.
But I agree that a lot of this stuff is still up in the air. There's no plans. In reality, is it gonna be built in 2 years?
Probably not.
Speaking for myself personally, not the board, because we haven't, but I would say no.
So you're saying 2012 would be all right for now?
No, 13
in
is what
12.
you're
Or
saying,
13, excuse me. And I too think 2013 is good,
Okay,
because
so-
we can always move it one more year. It frees us up for next year's
Next
plan.
time we'll move it 2 years.
Well, maybe the chief will have a better handle on what's happening the next time he comes in. All right, so we're tentatively set to move the fire station's 17 new station out to the year 2013, just as a placeholder. And the subsequent offsetting revenue column will also be moved out to 2013. And, you know, does it cost any money to have the bond schedule calculated, Nick? Did the DRA or somebody charge you for that?
No, go to the bond bank.
Well, then,
Again, that's based on interest rates, so that could, if you have it done this year, in 3 years, it
Yeah,
We got some
Good change.
placeholder.
give you current rates.
give you an approximate based on today's rates.
well, maybe, do you mind doing that, Brian, for the purpose of completing the matrix?
I will.
And you
do my best.
and in the memo column, you can write a note that this bond has been calculated at 2010 rates, and it may be higher,
Or is it gonna be
depending
10,
upon,
15,
or maybe
20
lower.
years?
At the time it's
I mean, you don't know.
purchased, it can be
It's
adjusted.
gonna be a 10-year bond,
Interesting.
15, 20?
In the matrix, Brian, that you sent us, there's another page, bond payment. It's a calculator for that, but it only goes up to 4,800,000.
So let's just build a smaller fire station.
No, what you do is
It'll
you,
fit.
no, you
Phase
go,
one,
no,
phase two.
you go to 3.5 and
We
double
talked
it.
about that.
No, you go to 3.5 and double it. You do
Well,
the same thing with an
is there-
amortization table. It
Is,
doesn't go out far enough.
is it a formula? Because if
It has various
Just
debt
carried the
year,
formula
balance,
down.
principal, rate at 5.25.
Hank, we did talk as a committee, we did
3.5.
talk about phasing the fire station,
About what?
having a two-phase fire station project. When we had the committee meetings about it, we talked about it.
$436,000 for 3.6.
Two phases, one to
if you
get the
just
building
change-
built
if
with
you
the,
just change the number in the
some of
top,
the
would it
rooms,
recalculate
and
the
add
whole
the other
thing?
stuff later.
Let's see.
From
'cause currently-
4,815,000 to 7 million?
I know, as long as
I
you
don't
know.
want- I don't wanna talk over it.
Let's try it.
Well, let's not waste time on this. You guys can do your bond calculations and put it in the next matrix when we get it.
600,930.
Each
First
year?
year. No,
Oh,
then it
first
goes
year.
589, 576, so it's 600 and then.
And that's a 20-year bond.
Yes.
What would be the typical time frame on this? Would it be 20 years?
I would imagine that's.
Now, would the fire department rather have 20 new fire trucks or 20 payments on one building?
Well, hey,
I'll have to ask the chief that
get a
question.
great big tent.
For every one of those bond payments, each year you could have bought a brand new engine. You got the shiniest fleet in the state. All right. So, if we have no other business to attend to,
Well,
go ahead, Earl, I apologize.
Okay, we're still carrying line 43, capital reserve fund for fire equipment. The voters defeated that last year. Nick, is that gonna be back up on the warrant this year?
We have not had the discussion yet. I don't know.
Oh, we put money in there last year and it got,
Right, it got
was
whacked
voted
out.
down.
I thought that all the capital reserve funds were the types of things that we would include when times are a little better, when people have, I know it's a good idea to save, but maybe they don't wanna pay taxes for a savings account right now. It was a great thing the first time we did it, and it really paid off. We wouldn't have that new tower without that capital reserve fund.
Correct.
And this goes to the possible restructuring of the whole this CIP committee to do it like Bedford does. Bedford does it, everything is on a savings plan. When
Of course, the fact that the chief was able to pull off a $600,000 and some odd $1,000,
720.
715, 500.
you know,
Round numbers, 720.
yeah, it's
That was huge.
absolutely huge.
So that kind of reduces our chances of getting another grant for a fire engine for a while.
Yeah, probably.
But it doesn't stop a building, because didn't Hooksett and Manchester just get that Homeland Security grant for a,
No, we were turned down.
I thought that went through.
No, Londonderry
Oh.
received the grant. I don't know if they went forward with it. There were some issues, but no, Manchester and Hooksett are discussing a
What, stuff
joint.
Stuff that was tied to the grant, they didn't like the terms of it or something?
Yeah,
Londonderry?
I'm not sure, but the
Okay.
voters didn't approve. I'm not quite sure what happened, but that was the only one that was approved.
All right, I guess.
Normally, we would do our CIP priorities as a last-ditch effort here. I think we've addressed those priorities as we've addressed the items that we talked about moving, and so is it fair to say that the committee has reviewed the priorities and feels comfortable with the priorities as they stand
For 2011,
for this 2011?
okay, fine.
But actually, the priorities apply to all the out-year purchases as well, which we did not go through all them.
No.
But since they're all subject to change at a future date for future meetings, they don't have any negative effect on our decision for tonight.
So, did we vote or did we not vote?
No, we're gonna
Haven't
vote.
voted yet.
We're gonna
I
vote.
have just one thing, are we gonna move the command post out?
He did say a couple of years,
He did, yes, he did.
Yeah.
so someone wants to
That's in
make a
for
motion?
2000. I'll make the motion that we move the command post from 2012 to 2014.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passed. Look at the difference in the price of the cars. They've jumped dramatically
Yeah.
from 11 to 12 to 13 to 14.
Question, by the way,
Yes, sir.
line 10,
Crown Vic.
yeah. We're showing it this year and then again in 13.
Good catch. I'm sure it's the wrong car, but,
I think that should go,
To match.
There's sort of a strange overlap.
but then we got line
That
6.
probably goes up to line
well,
6.
6.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it would match up with the 3 that were approved for 2010,
There's only 2 there.
and then that would match up with the trio that comes out of 2010.
Then what happens to line 16?
It just remains the way it is.
Doesn't exist.
It's a 62,000 mile vehicle, maybe it's a detective's car. It doesn't even have a priority attached to it, if you
Right,
look at
it
it.
doesn't have a price, you would think that one would go along with the next 2 lines.
That may be one of the chiefs, or, let's see, line 16 was the,
Patrol. It's listed as patrol.
Car number 7.
these were the updated numbers that the police department had submitted. I just took and copied their entire thing that they revised.
So line.
Could you just please
check with him.
check with the chief on line 10 and see if the 39,667 in that line 10 is misplaced in the year 2013? Does it need to be placed in a different spot?
It's 2008 Crown Vic.
Good catch, Earl.
Wait, 09.
That's in all the matrices, going back.
Yeah, but just, I'm looking
Yeah.
at this with a little different eye. And then what happens to line 16? We don't show a replacement there.
That's true.
I believe the police department's numbers only went out to 2015.
Yeah, but line 16, under normal circumstances, would be in 2012.
Right.
You know, right, because that's also a 2008 vehicle.
Right.
Well, they have 4 2008 vehicles. So they must have gotten one on an overlap year.
6 years, 6 years.
They have another one in 21 as a 2008 vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
We're showing those, 6-year replacement. something's wrong.
Yeah,
Something is definitely wrong, because we've got, for example, the 2010s were showing as being replaced after 3 years. The 2006s were showing, it looks like a 5-year. The 2008's a 4-year. The 2009's a 6-year.
I'll check with the police.
Yeah.
Well, you notice one of them is a K-9 patrol car now, one is a sergeant's car.
I mean, the dare vehicle, the dog car,
Well, the K-9 car is not necessarily not used.
used.
It's used every day. It's
Right.
just assigned the K-9 duty. All right. He seems to have them grouped in threes as they were replacing threes.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about, I guess it doesn't matter. 3 vehicles a year is 3 vehicles a year, and we've always given him the flexibility to swap one for another based upon condition.
By the time
I'm
he
not
gets them,
gonna-
it's next March.
I'm not going to worry about
I'm not gonna worry about it either. So do we come back next week?
it. No, we're going to vote. We're going to vote on the motion. The motion made by Earl, seconded by Suzanne, to adopt the 2011 proposed CIP with revisions is on the floor. Any more discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, we'll vote on it. All those in favor of adopting this year's 2011 matrix with revisions signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Chair votes yes. I voted no last year.
yes, you did.
This year I vote yea.
Is that an improvement?
Well, I wasn't happy with the matrix last year. This year I am.
So I guess the question is, are we now done, or do we have to come back and vote on a final
Well, we
matrix?
can read the minutes of the 15th, and maybe we can approve those.
Once
tonight.
we've adopted the matrix,
You already did that.
Well, which one didn't we, the last one?
No, they did 2.
We're caught up.
That's
Oh, that's right, that's the
tonight's
one I
minutes,
abstained from.
tonight's minutes we won't
Right.
actually vote on unless I do an email vote to everybody and get a response, and then I can forward it to Brian for finality.
I don't think we've done that in the past. I
Well,
don't think it's,
We slacked off in the past.
we can
So
improve
we still
them
have
next-
another deliberative session scheduled for August the 5th, in 2 weeks, if needed. Does anyone feel that we need to have that meeting?
August 5th is in
Next
1 week.
Or 1 week, excuse me.
Isn't it planning board night?
There's an off week this week for next week. This week.
August 12th is the next planning board meeting.
When are you gonna present it, Tim?
August the 12th. It's timely because it needs to be presented, then it has to be, go to a public hearing and be adopted, and then it has to be sent to the board and the budget committee so that they'll have ample time to review and do their work. So the sooner, if we can meet our timetable and get it to them in a timely fashion, it's
Yeah,
the better.
budget committee doesn't get it until the selectmen have done
I don't know who gets it, but.
their, thank God.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for all the work that's gone into the 2010, Capital Improvement Committee. Did I say that wrong? Did I say 2011 when we had our vote? We voted on the
It is. We're gonna
2011.
vote in
Right.
2011.
I want to make sure it was correct.
It's a good thing it's our last meeting, Tim.
I'd like to thank everyone for the time they put into this meeting here. I know that we're missing 2 representatives this year, the Budget Committee and another community at large. Hank volunteered to step up and be a community at large member, and I thank him for that. And I hope that in next upcoming years that we have some more interest from citizens to step forward and be part of this process. It doesn't need to just be us 6 here. It could be a lot more. I'd like to thank everybody personally for their time.
We'd like to thank you for doing a great job sharing.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Earl, seconded by Suzanne to adjourn. All those, any discussion on the motion?
Oh, we stay a little longer?
Undebatable motion.
It's either yes or no. Can't talk about it.
You know, we haven't put a line in for ourselves yet for beverages and,
He just doesn't want the meeting to be over yet. He
Having
wants-
withdrawals already.
he
okay.
wants-
All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes.
Marie's down the hallway, she just voted aye.
Marie did?
I don't know, Nick, maybe you like staying out at night instead of going home.